And do we need to? Our speaker today is Valerie Clote. She's speaking on Earth energies, ley lines, and the current times. Valerie encountered an unusual experience with Earth energies shortly after moving to Taos in 2014. She will share her experience and how it relates to this time period in human evolution and Earth history. Valerie has a degree in geology. Her employment history and fieldwork of data acquisition and processing in electromagnetic geophysics, forestry, and other earth science-related fields of study in industry and research has gifted her the privilege of engaging intimately with the earth for over 15 years. In addition, she has been involved in GIS computerized mapping for a number of years. Currently, Valerie enjoys combining her interests in yoga, meditation, and spirituality as a laughter yoga teacher. In 2011, after experiencing the power of play through the unconventional activity of intentional and unconditional laughter as exercise, an entirely new world opened up for her. As a newly published author, she shares playful, deep breathing activities in her first book, Happy Breathing. She continues to write, teach classes, and train others in play shops. Valerie. Hey. A round of applause.
Okay. All right. I am so honored to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for those on Zoom. Thank you for your presence today. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my story, my perspective of what the heck is going on today in Earth's history, these challenging times. So I will share my story, what I experienced, how it relates to Earth energies, the ley lines, and the current times. I will also share a little bit of information about laughter yoga because I am a laughter yoga teacher and it changed my life. It also dovetails nicely into what I will be speaking about. And because of what I will be covering can go very deep into details, I will just give the generalized information to make sense of the science. So I did experience something unusual when I first moved here to Taos in 2014. And most recently, about 6 months ago, I came across some information that helped me put this experience into context. So it has to do with my earth science background, my personal history, and the shift that we are going through. And if you are unaware that we are going through a shift, I can assure you that we most definitely are. So it's a natural 25,000 to 26,000 year cycle. And one of the names for it is precession of the equinoxes. And we are so lucky to be here now, right? So this discussion will be based on vibrations, frequency, and harmonics. Now, oftentimes you hear the terms vibration and frequency used together. And that is because frequency describes the rate of vibration in cycles per second or hertz. So it gives an identifying factor to the rate of vibration. Harmonics can be best described as component frequencies in an oscillation or a wave. Now, in electromagnetic geophysics, we worked a little bit with harmonics, but I assure you, musicians know much more about harmonics than I. So ley lines for this discussion will be simply understood as earth energies. They are much more than that, but this is the most simple concept for this time. And also, it might be a good idea to begin thinking of waveforms and frequencies in 3 dimensions. Oftentimes, you see this waveform illustrated in an image on paper, 2D. And that's a great way to convey information. But in fact, Earth energies are three-dimensional in nature. They go well below the surface of the Earth, as well as well above the surface of the Earth. They can be described as spherical standing waves. Now they oscillate and move, but that's a very good term. We live in a sea of energy. Everything vibrates at different frequencies, which is the world that we see and the world that we don't see. It's full of information. Space is not empty at all. Everything is in constant motion, exchanging information at all scales. We are beginning to understand that we live and are part of a quantum holographic universe. And exactly what that means can be left for another time, and how we can incorporate this information in our daily lives. So I do have a degree in geology, but electromagnetic, geophysics, and forestry are mostly what I worked in. I did field work for data acquisition and processing. And I have to tell you, it was the most fun I ever had. I oftentimes felt like MacGyver out in the field trying to repair electronic and mechanical equipment with the tools that you have out in remote areas in the field, and to get back into production. So I traveled across the nation. I was involved in a variety of different types of surveys, often in beautiful remote areas. In electromagnetic geophysics in the industry, I was involved in reconnaissance for mineral exploration. So these are initial surveys to see if there's anything of value that you want to investigate further. For those of you that don't know what electromagnetic geophysics is, it's a tool to gain understanding of the subsurface through interpretation of data. This data has to do with the conductivity and the resistivity of the ground. Typically, what you're looking for is an anomaly against a generalized background set of data. So I wanted to give you a little bit of understanding of electromagnetic geophysics, because I think with all my field work in forestry, geophysics, and other earth science surveying, over 15 years contributed to my energy system, my body becoming sensitized to earth energies on a more subtle level. Now, certainly this was on an unconscious level, but this event brought this unconscious information to a conscious level. So this brings me to share what happened. When I first moved here, I joined a hiking club called the Lost Boys. Now, they only got lost once, but the name stuck. And we were coming back from a hike from the Santa Fe direction on Highway 68 back to Taos. I was in a carpool sitting in the back seat of the car, and we were chatting, having a good time, when all of a sudden their voices became warbled, and there was a reverberation in my head. The voices sound like wah, 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 wah. And I looked at them to see if they were experiencing the same thing I was. And it appeared that they were not. They were just chatting away like nothing ever happened. And my hearing returned to normal shortly, but there was no doubt that I experienced something. And frankly, I was frightened. I hadn't a clue what had happened. It wasn't long after that that I began to experience similar sensations on hikes that we would go on. I would get a buzzing, typically in the right ear, and my body would tingle and buzz. The next time I experienced this, I recognized that it was a similar sensation, so I wasn't so frightened of it, but I was still very uncomfortable because I didn't know what was going on. And by the third time, I began to understand a little more of what was happening. And I was beginning to enjoy this energizing sensation if I could relax into it. On the hikes, on the trails, I would experience something on the way up, but not on the way down. Sometimes the energies were strong and expansive, And then sometimes they were weak and fleeting. So I tried to map the sites with my phone and GPS to see if there might be some patterning. But there were too many sites, and I was unable to take data and keep up with a hiking group. They were so fast. And I didn't want to bring this up to anybody because it was a little too far out for me. You know, I didn't know what was going on. I also looked around to see if there was anything obvious, and sometimes there was. For example, on Divisadero, there's a power line that crosses the trail, and I picked that up. One time on a hike with a friend, I came across a site, and so this allowed me some time to investigate it a little more. I was able to actually step inside the energy and outside the energy to delineate a boundary. So this was an energy vortex. And so it allowed me to understand more of what I was experiencing. Then I began to get this buzzing indoors. It was no longer confined to the outside. I did some traveling across the states to Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada, and I would get similar earth energy hits. So I did want to share also, on the highway from Socorro, coming back north, I sensed a strong buzzing along the highway. Now, there are power lines that parallel this, but it was very strong and very expansive. We drove, I don't know for how many miles. And then I found out later that there is a magma chamber in that area, and it is rising, so it's active. I still didn't know what quite to make of all this until I got the same sensations on somewhat parallel roads of what I experienced on Highway 68. Highway 64 going to the gorge, I sensed something. And then also the road to the slide trail past UNM. And once I got those sensations, I realized that that's about the same place I sensed that on Highway 68. So I thought, oh, that must be a ley line. So I understood what I was picking up, but I still didn't know what to do with this information. There was no rhyme or reason. I didn't know when or how I would pick this up. So it was very intermittent. And this brings me to the information I came across recently to make sense of all this for me. I happened to see a couple interviews on YouTube with Rory Duff. Rory Duff was a geologist in South Africa in the gold mines, and he's now a geobiologist who is someone who studies how Earth affects living organisms on and within the Earth. He learned how to dowse for water when in South Africa, and he has been dowsing ever since for more than 30 years. He lives in the UK now, and his interest is in ley lines, nodes, and vortices, all Earth energies. When I heard Rory's interviews, all the pieces of my life came together. In that, when I was a child, about 5 years old, I knew that things were not as they appeared to be. And I was very confused because what I knew to be truth on the inside was not what I was experiencing on the outside. Now, most children come in with some inherent knowing of some kind, and it's conditioned out of them, which is exactly what happened to me. But I still do remember this point of time in knowing. Then when I was in grade school, in about 4th grade, in science class, I learned that solid objects really weren't solid, that they were mostly space. And I thought, that's fascinating. What's going on? I suppose that's when I became interested in the mechanics of the nature of reality. Though I didn't have anyone to share this curiosity with, both my brothers were off to college, and my older sister was in her own world. My mother had her hands full, supporting and raising the 4 children on her own after a divorce since I was 3. Then when I was 15, I was also, I was in a very dark, depressed state in my life, so much so that I was considering suicide. Now, a lot of folks have insight at this time when they contemplate or attempt suicide, such as Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now. And I did have some insight. I was walking on a sidewalk in the city that we lived, and I heard a voice say, "You will experience something very special. You will experience something very special." And it said it twice to make sure I heard it. And I did. So the thought of suicide flew out the window. And I thought, oh, I have something to live for. I don't know what it is, but I have something to live for. So, and at the same time, I got this burning sensation on the crown of my head. And this is long before I knew anything about chakras or energy centers. And also, a snippet of information came to me from a short documentary that I saw in a preview in the movie theaters. I used to go to the theaters a lot when I was young. And this documentary had to do with Nostradamus and his predictions for World War III, the end of the world and new life. And so between this message of experience something very special, the burning sensation on the crown of my head, and this snippet of information about the end of the world and the beginning of new life, I interpreted to be the end of the world. I would experience the end of the world as we know it and the beginning of new life. So basically, that's what's happening today for this shift. It follows other spiritual prophecies, for example, the Mayan calendar. And in the Hindu religion, the end of the Kali Yuga. Yuga is an era of time. The Kali Yuga is known as the Dark Ages. The Satya Yuga is next, the Golden Age or the New Earth. And I had forgotten most of this until COVID hit. And so now it seems to be the time that all of it's coming together for me. Back to Rory Duff's information. Rory has been mapping and measuring ley lines across the globe, in person and remotely. He also works with others to create and share this information on his website. His mission is to have people gather at nodes, which are where ley lines cross, and have the earth energies teach us at this time of transition. Of particular interest for me is in his measurements of ley lines that he has made over the years. That's okay. The lines come in pairs and become harmonized with each other at new moon, full moon, equinoxes, and solstices. As we move forward in time, he has discovered that the central part of these pairs of lines have been widening and staying in coherence for longer periods of time. He's extrapolated the data to predict that by the end of December 2024, we will have a full year of harmonics at this higher level of frequency. And that is what's happening right now. Because of this natural 25,000-year cycle, we are literally shifting in frequency. It's been equated to moving into a higher octave in musical terms, because everything is energy, vibration, and frequency, including us. We are energy systems. It affects us individually, collectively, globally, galactically, and cosmologically. So you can get a visual example of what happens when there's a shift in frequency through the science of cymatics. Cymatics, you can place sand or salt on a vibrating plate and set it to a certain frequency, and the particles will arrange themselves into a geometric pattern according to that frequency. As you turn the frequency up, the pattern begins to fall apart and go into chaos until it rearranges itself into a more highly organized, complex geometric pattern. And that is what we are going through right now, chaos. As we reorganize into a sustainable system that operates at this higher level of frequency, and I might add, a higher level of consciousness. We are moving into a more heart-centered, collaborative, unified society. Anything that is unsustainable at this higher level of harmonics must adapt or go away. As one spiritual teacher, Bentino Massaro has said, you can't take an ice cube to the sun. For me, this shift has brought up a lot of shadow work to be healed and transformed. Also, I can't eat the same foods I used to, so my body is changing. It seems to be a purification of sorts. So we are not just shifting into a new phase, but we are also being bombarded by solar flares, cosmic energies, and the Schumann resonance spikes, which I can hear at night. When I try to go to sleep, if it's spiking, I can hear that. And I don't watch news or pay attention to the Schumann resonance records, but I do have a friend that does. And when I speak to her, I'll ask her if, oh, say, were the Schumann resonance high, say on Tuesday? And sure enough, they are. So it's been confirmed. So also, so this brings on a paradigm shift as well. We have to begin to think differently as we integrate this new information. If you are familiar with the Gene Keys by Richard Rudd, he talks about the great change in Gene Key number 55, which you can access. You can read it or listen to him reading it on his website, the Gene Keys. So it's an interpretation of what we're going through and what to experience perhaps. So I highly recommend that. So after Rory's interviews, I felt a huge sense of release. I came to understand more of what I was experiencing as far as earth energies. And I felt a confirmation of my intuitive knowing of this major change, the knowing since I was a child. So I felt compelled to write Rory as a fellow earth scientist and someone that would understand what I experienced. One thing he mentions is that not all ley lines are electromagnetic in nature, but in fact, very low frequency, as in the subauditory range, which I did not know. This explains why it affected my hearing. It was a pressure gradient of a very low frequency, a spherical standing wave that we drove through. So this reminds me of a VLF, a very low frequency survey that I did, reconnaissance for gold outside of Prescott, Arizona. So you have survey lines and stations that you take data at, and the VLF instrument was kind of a metallic box on a stick, and you would wave it up and down vertically. You turn it on, it has a little hum. You turn it on, wave it vertically until you get a null in the sound, and that would be a vertical coordinate on that site. And then you would wave it horizontally until you get a null in the sound, and that would be the horizontal axis coordinate. And at the time, I thought, you know, if anyone was watching me, this has got to be the most bizarre thing to be seeing, this instrument, metallic instrument waving around in the air in the middle of no place. I thought, you know, I must look like I'm an alien from outer space. VLF is still used today to communicate and navigate submarines because the wavelength can penetrate the water. So I was not expecting a reply from Rory, but in fact, he did write back. He sent a map of ley lines in the Taos area. And so there are two nodes in this area. One is in town by the Farmhouse Cafe, and the other is the top of Two Peaks. To gather at these nodes, it's not feasible. The one by the farmhouse has too much electromagnetic interference, and the one at Two Peaks is a bit too remote and not very safe. So I've been out to Two Peaks twice, once by myself for scouting the area, and I never made it to the top. But the second time I went with friends, and it was a new moon or full moon time, and on the way up, I definitely ran into a ley line. No one else could feel it, and they asked me what it felt like. So to me, it felt like pure bliss. I was energized and complete, satiated on all levels. I think I could have stayed there forever. We did make it to the node, and none of us felt anything. So Rory does have several books out, and this one, in this one, he categorizes types of lays, and he goes into theories about how they might be created through Earth's core and also through the contribution of cosmic energies. But it's far too detailed to go into that now. I also did want to mention that I came to spirituality through science. When I was in physics class in college, we learned about how light waves worked, and I had an aha moment. I stepped outside on campus in Tucson, and I looked around and I thought, oh my gosh, everything is light. Everything is electromagnetic in the visible spectrum. So what is going on? In my mind, if everything is light, that means it's malleable. It was in the 80s, and I tried to speak to friends, and they didn't want to have anything to do with this. I thought, certainly I'm not the first person that has thought of this. And I didn't ever come across any New Thought authors at the time. And so also Einstein says that this world is very persuasive. And I thought, well, maybe I'm wrong. So it's really great to see this information coming out now in mainstream. So I understand it's a bit more complicated than just being malleable, but we are beginning to understand how consciousness plays a huge role in how we experience and perceive reality. There's still debate in the scientific community as to if consciousness is fundamental, as Donald Hoffman describes. He's a cognitive science at the University of California at Irvine. And there are scientists that are materialistic, that say consciousness arises and is a factor from the brain. I'll let you decide. So that about wraps it up for this part of the presentation. I did want to say a few words about laughter yoga, or laughter as exercise. As mentioned, it broke me open to a whole new world. It's very heart-centered. One of the first things I experienced in training while we did laughter activities was that you actually exercise spiritual qualities such as non-judgment and acceptance. So you get a feeling state of these qualities and muscle memory the more often you do it. No longer are they ideas in the mind, but you actually put them into practice. Because you are laughing for no reason, without the use of comedy, humor, or jokes, it bypasses the logic. And often you're laughing with people you have never met. So I said laughter for no reason, but in fact, there are many. Laughter engages the social, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical levels simultaneously and immediately. Ideally, you do want to do hearty laughter for 10 to 15 minutes to reap the full spectrum of health benefits. So not only does it lower stress hormones, increase happy hormones, brings in huge amounts of oxygen, brings you to the present moment like nothing else I've discovered, works the respiratory, cardiovascular system, digestive system, shifts the neurology to bring in high frequency gamma brainwave states, which are above the beta brainwave state, the thinking mind, to whole brain activity and bliss. This is the state that longtime meditators can access, and you can access this by laughing. So there is something called the bliss molecule. This is a neurotransmitter called anandamide. It's an endocannabinoid that binds to the cannabinoid receptors. And these are the same receptors that the psychoactive compound THC in cannabis acts on. These neurotransmitters were discovered in 1992, so fairly recently. And there's been a lot of research on the flow state in athletes, which bring in anandamide, serotonin, and dopamine, which is accessed through laughter as well. So ananda is Sanskrit meaning bliss. And this is what laughter can do for you. It certainly does it for me. And it's interesting that it's the same state of being that I picked up from the earth energies. It's also interesting that when I led laughter class here, when I first moved here, at the end, we typically will do a laughter meditation for 5 minutes, lying on the floor and laughing solid. I would experience the buzzing in the right ear and the tingling and the buzzing in the body, just as I did when I would experience earth energies. So that tells me that my body, my energy system, is being raised in vibrations and frequencies by laughing. So this is really no surprise. We understand more on a chemical level how emotions in our vibratory state of being through research done, for example, the Heart Math Institute, The Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert, and Dr. Joe Dispenza brings this information into his workshop. And if you're familiar with Dr. David Hawkins, he has mapped out levels of emotional states. So, for example, enlightenment is 700 to 1,000, peace 600, joy 540, love 500, and it goes down from there. But love, joy, peace, and enlightenment are the top 4 states of emotional states of being that you can be at, according to David Hawkins. So that is how laughter ties into all this. It's a tool to raise your vibratory state of being, literally. It's also important to remain lighthearted and open to new information when speaking about these heavy philosophical and spiritual concepts. You can take life so seriously, and laughter brings this balance back into being. On a side note, I would have loved to share information about physicist Nassim Harameyn's work on the unified field theory, crystal technology, and his 64-star tetrahedron geometry. In his Resonance Academy's research into biophysics, there's a lot of great new information coming out right now. So there's a free course on unified field theory on his website, and this brings in the unified mechanics from the quantum realm through Newtonian physics. So there's unified mechanics from infinitely small to infinitely large. And he plans to publish soon. And this will definitely bring in a new paradigm. So in closing, there are many paths that lead back to yourself and to home. And we need all of them, for they are the individuation of the collective back to unity. What I shared with you today is just my path and my timeline. So I did want to leave you with a quote from Buddha. Change is never painful. Only the resistance to change is painful. So I really thank you for listening so much.
I'd say you knocked that one right out of the park.
Valerie. Katie has a question.
Oh, yeah.
I did have a question.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I've been hearing articles about how the Earth's core is quit spinning.
Oh,
You heard that?
no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. I thought that might have something to do with the evolutionary changes we're going through.
It would have to do with the electromagnetics of the Earth. Now, magnetics are really low at this time, and that allows for infiltration of energies that normally we're protected from, which affects human consciousness. So I don't know, everything spins is part of the unified field theory. You know, everything, you know, on different scales, they're all spinning and communicating with each other through black holes, essentially. And so it's kind of impossible for things not to spin, but on a grander level, I haven't heard that. It would have to do more with the possible reversal of the magnetic poles that, you know, is hoped, or not hoped, but certainly may be experienced. Yeah.
Right.
I also have listened to an interview with Rory Duff with the Heather Ensworth. She's an astrologer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fabulous because he's talking about how there are actually several layers of grids. I too experienced the grid. I didn't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it. I was in Washington State, and it was possibly because the Mount St. Helens was about to go up. And it probably heightened all of the electrical magnetics up in that area. And I was just laying there putting the garden in. I'm laying there and I'm looking up, and sure enough, these grids, it's just vibration and electrical, it looks just like an electrical vibration.
Mhm.
And it's all like pretty much square grids, I mean, I don't know about you, but as creative people, we're like, oh, why isn't everything round? But to have the grids and squares too, at least what I saw was kind of like, wow, that's kind of interesting. But then with the Rory Duff, he's saying that there are several layers of grids. And then that's kind of, I've often wondered how astrology works. And so this woman Insworth was saying that because of these, these grid layers, they are also catching the electrical vibrations from the planets in our solar system, which then transcend. So that's how we are all connected in the cosmos. In my little head. But thank you so much. You are evidently a very sensitive person who, thank you for sharing, because you're feeling these things that, are there, and some of us are not feeling.
Yeah, no, we all have different gifts. We're all energy systems attuned to different frequencies, and we pick up different information in that way. And so we need everyone to understand what's going on, because everyone can feed information into the collective. Yeah.
Which reminds me, next week, we're going to have Dr. Mark Mash talking about the frequencies of your brain and different ways to work on them.
Cool.
It's called Tending the Garden of Your Soul. It's his talk. It's going to be awesome. It's 10 o'clock next Sunday. And now I'm going to sing a little song about the mountain, because I think that's why we're all here, actually. I think that's basically what's in charge, the magnetics of that. The mountain is strong, it'll hold you all night long. The mountain is true, the mountain will hold you. The mountain will hold you. Snow falls on the mountain's face, held in its soft embrace. The sun melts it slow, and down to the river it will flow. The mountain will hold you, and the myriad stars show how vast and small we are, and the sunrise will bless all love it's come to rest. Here I can dance and sing. Here I will lay my sorrows to rest. Here I'm one with everything. The mountain will hold you. The mountain will hold you. And everyone. We're going to sing our love song. The words are up there. Now there is love on earth, and it has begun with me. Now there is love on earth, a love that was meant to be. With all our relations, loved ones all are we. Now I walk with my family in perfect harmony. Love has begun with me, and this is the moment now. With every breath I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in love eternally. Now there is love on earth, and it has begun with me. We are the The light, the love, and the presence, wherever we are, love is, and all is well. Thank you for being here. There's some snacks up in the kitchen. Something about gluten-free chocolate cake, just saying. Thanks for being here. Come back and see us again.
By the way, I do have books for sale. Happy reading. If you're interested in purchasing.
They're up there by the door. Dave is waving it around. Thank you, Dave. Love you, Zimsters. Mwah. Thanks for joining us too.
All right. Great.